All right, I am with our guest this week. Very excited to talk to her. One, Stefanie Ungar-Campbell, the daughter of a legendary poker player, Poker Hall of Famer, three-time World Series of Poker main event winner, Stu Ungar. Stefanie, it's a real pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to chat with Poker News.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's something I've been looking forward to. You've been very active on social media recently where you've been
Yeah.
sharing photos and stories about your father, which is really what led us here. I was following those. I did an article for Poker News. So I guess let me ask this question right off the bat is what inspired you to kind of open up on social media and kind of share these stories with the larger poker world?
From time to time, I'll like Google just certain stories and just my dad's name in a weird way. Just reading over stuff like memories and things like that is somewhat even therapeutic for me at times. And but I've noticed throughout the years, like there are like some things that aren't fully accurate, or maybe just he's known more like at the poker table rather than the man who I knew, who I find to be like so amazing in so many ways, honestly. And I just felt like, he's such a looked up person, he's like a legend in the poker world. And I was like, I just feel like I want his fans and just for people to know like more about the man that I knew away from the poker table, because you always hear like he's generous or he was this or he was that, and I just want to like add more of like the behind the scenes of who I knew him to be.
Right.
So,
And on the flip side of that, the poker world really only knew you previously from the 1997 World Series of Poker main event broadcast. After your dad had won, he did an interview with Gabe Kaplan. And I remember this,
yeah.
the videos on YouTube where, he held up a picture of you. I think you were 14 at the time. And,
Mhm.
said that he loves you and that he would be seeing you soon. And,
Yeah.
that right there, showed a lot what you meant to him. But, you were immortalized, if you will, in the poker world from that one little moment. Do you remember watching that moment on TV and seeing that?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, I knew that he did that because he was calling me in between, well, first of all, during that tournament, he was calling me in between hands. And then at the end, after he was done and he won, he told me, he goes, I showed your picture. He goes, so you'll see it on TV. And I was like, oh my gosh, you have my picture. And anyways, that's how I found out he had my picture in his pocket the whole time. And then when I saw it, I just thought it was really sweet, really amazing. And so I still watch it sometimes from every time to time, maybe ever so often. And just hearing his voice and things like that I miss. Like, so I will kind of hold on to, those kind of things and periodically watch them. So.
Sure. And
Yeah.
prior to 1997, when you were 14, what was your relationship like, with your dad when you were a little bit younger? If I'm not mistaken, you and your mother had kind of moved away while he was on the poker grind. Can you just maybe talk a little bit, share a little bit about that aspect of his life?
Sure, yeah. So my mom and I moved to Florida when I was about 6. And so what I used to do is I used to always spend all my Christmas vacations with him, Easter vacation, anytime that I was not in school. I spent the entire summers, like all 3 months. So I'd fly out to Vegas and just as much time as I could, I would have with him. And then in between that, he would actually fly out to Florida to come visit me for like my birthday and things like that. So that was kind of, I'd say, what my childhood was like until he won the third World Series. And he was like, I want you out here. Like, just talk to my mom, was like, whatever we got to do to get you guys to move back here. I want to be close to my daughter. And so literally, we came out here right after he won the World Series. He told us that, we went back home and packed and just came right back like within weeks. So yeah. So I actually got to spend the last 2 years of his life with him, which obviously I didn't know that was going to be the last 2 years.
Sure.
So it was like a real blessing, that I got those last 2 years because we spent quite a bit of time together. So.
What was the relationship like with Stuey and your mom? After they had obviously separated, were they friendly? Was there
Oh
any
gosh,
animosity?
no, they're both characters. I'll tell you that. I was raised around some just some funny stuff. But it's weird because I feel like they were each other's like soulmate, you know, like neither of them ever really went on to meet anybody that was quite like what they had. But unfortunately, I think that just drugs and women and groupies and all that just really got in the way, unfortunately, of trying to have a real marriage. And it just didn't last. Like they were together on and off for 10 years before getting married, and then came to Vegas, and it only really lasted 4 years after that, and then it was over with. So that's why I mean, like the character, like you could always tell they loved each other, like always, but it just wasn't going to work for a marriage, you know?
Right.
So, yeah.
You had mentioned that, you know, you guys came out to Vegas, you got to spend the last 2 years before he passed, you know, there with Vegas. And, you know, when he did pass away in 1998, you know, what was, obviously it was a very tough time for you. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that and, you know, that kind of period and kind of that mourning process, if you will?
Yeah, that was really hard for me. See, my dad, for me, he wasn't only just my dad, he was like my best friend. So for me, it felt like a double loss because I used to talk to him every day. And I mean, like, sometimes for like hours, you know, we would just talk. Like he literally was my best friend. So when he passed, I literally couldn't even cry. Like it was so painful. I don't even think that I was able to tap into it. I like stayed strong, and I just was trying to make it through. And it took me about 2 years to fully finally let out like a deep like cry, like of like just grieving, because I think I just kicked into survival mode and just tried to make it through. So that was like the hardest thing to go through. I was 16 at the time, you know, so it was just, yeah, it just was hard. Yeah.
I certainly can only imagine. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself today? I know you're living in Las Vegas. I know
Yeah.
you've got some children. Can you give the
Yeah.
listeners an update?
Yeah, so I'm in Vegas. I'm currently a producer, so I have, you know, I'm into that. I have 2 kids. I've been married 10 years. My daughter reminds me a lot of my dad. She has this memory that's crazy out of this world, and very, very sharp, very witty, which is so much like my dad. But my dad said I was like him to a T, so I just feel like maybe she's like me. I don't know. So it all goes together. So, anyways, and then I have a son, and when he was born, everybody said he looked just like my dad. So, so yeah, I love being in Vegas. Vegas is my home for sure, and yeah, so that's kind of where I am at this time.
I think it kind of begs the question, if you know, if your dad was still around and now that you have children, do you think he would make a great grandfather?
Oh my gosh, yes. I always tell them that. I'm like, I wish so badly that my dad, their grandfather, could have met them. They would have had him wrapped around their finger, like I used to. So I could only imagine what it would be like as a grandfather, you know? So
Sure.
he would have spoiled them for sure. So
I know I was looking through your Instagram timeline and I seen a picture of you and your mom, and you were counting the time that you guys got to do the shuffle up and deal at the World
oh
Series of
yeah,
Poker main event. Um,
yes.
what
Yeah.
what was that like? I think it was like what, 2008, 2009?
Yeah, it had to have been. I don't know if anybody listening was there at that time, but yeah, they had asked me, they said, "Hey, since you're here," and I think we were there promoting my dad's book. I mean, we would go every year because it's like family. Like you run into like, it's a big family reunion. You run into like all these people. So we would go every year. And so they were like, "Stefanie, would you like to do the shuffle up and deal?" And not really knowing much about poker, I was like, okay, sure. Like, come to find out, like that's like a big thing, a big honor, and I recognize it now. But yeah, it was cool. Like I stood up on a chair in the middle of the floor. They announced, you know, Stu Ungar's daughter's here to do, you know, all that, and so everybody was excited, and then I just wished everyone good luck and shuffle up and deal, and then that was it. But it was fun. It was a good time.
Now, I know a lot of listeners, I know the answer to this before I ask, but I know a lot of listeners probably don't. Uh, do you play poker yourself?
You know what? I'm so glad you asked that because the last article that I believe you wrote, which was the one you were referring to in the beginning of our conversation, you had, you know, replied, wrote about one of my answers that I had put on Instagram, where fans, I allowed them to ask me anything they wanted on the anniversary of my father's death. And so I kind of celebrated in that way of just remembering him. And one of the questions, like I always get asked, is, do you play poker? And I said, no. And I said, my father never wanted me to learn. And the funny thing is, I was sent just a few days ago a podcast of somebody talking about your article, and they were the two guys in the on the podcast were saying, why doesn't she play poker? I don't understand it. Like, wouldn't you be curious to know if you have that same gift as you know, as her father and this and that? And so I was hoping you'd ask me this, because it's not that I don't want to learn how to play poker or I'm unmotivated in any way. Like, I actually respect the game a lot. But what I should share on, which I never do, is that my dad, the last few weeks before he passed away, one of our last conversations, he had told me, I never want you to play. Like, I just don't want you around that atmosphere, the way the guys talk at the table. I just don't feel like I would ever want you around that. And so for me, that was kind of like this last thing I could do to respect and honor him. So I just never really learned how to play, just because that was one of our last conversations. So that's really the real reason. And I think that story is not fully told. So I wanted to make sure to tell you today that that's really the reason why. I just did it out of honor and respect, really. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly makes sense, and I think you're doing a great job. As well, you might not be a poker player, you are now an ambassador of sorts by sharing you know, these memories and stories about your dad. As kind of a poker historian, let's talk real quick about the book you had just mentioned. You said you were at the WSOP, you know, kind of doing a little promotion of the book, The One of a Kind by Nolan Dalla and Peter Olson. A great poker book, absolutely a classic. I would recommend to anybody. They kind of did a movie based off that book that I know you weren't a big fan of. And in fact, you're kind of motivated to want to do maybe a different movie about the life of your father. So I thought maybe we'd talk about all that here real quick.
Yeah, so they actually approached us, I believe. I don't know if it was before the book came out, but they had the script, I believe, beforehand. And we read it, and I was just like, I just was like, no, this isn't really my dad. Like, you know, and so we declined, like, being a part, which is fine. I mean, when you're a public figure, anybody could write whatever really that they want, you know, so, or do whatever they want, you know. So they did. And when we were at that book signing, actually, so many fans came up to us asking, they were like, did you have anything to do with that movie? And we were like, no. And they were like, well, anyone that's a fan of Stewie's knew that that wasn't very accurate. And I was like, I don't know. I've never seen it. Like, I just know that I read a few pages of the script, and it just wasn't what I, you know, thought was, you know, accurate of my dad. So I never saw it. I didn't want to see it anyways. I feel like it would have, you know, kind of got me down or upset. I don't know, you know, so, but yeah, that book, his book has been bought as options in the past to be made into a movie. One guy by the name of Graham King, he is a huge Hollywood producer. He bought the option, but never followed through with it. So we've never actually got, in my opinion, a real, true, accurate story of my dad's life being told, which is why I really want to do it now that I'm in the producing world, and I want to just show the man behind the genius, the man that made him who he is, the 3-time world champion that he is. And I just want to show that side, as well as all the poker accomplishments and all that. So.
Well, I think, you know, he certainly lived a very interesting life and would make for a great movie, or possibly like a TV show. We've seen on Netflix the Queen's Gambit about chess, which, yeah, very popular. And a lot of people were saying they should do something similar with, you know, the poker world. And, you know, something about your father in that regard could certainly be a big hit.
Yeah, I've actually thought about that. I actually did develop something that has to do with telling about the underground world of poker. I actually, about 7 months ago, developed something of accumulating. I have all these stories, and I would love to be a part of doing something like a Netflix series, but I haven't approached the right people yet to be able, but I do have something developed, and I do have it submitted to be copywritten and all that, like, of my idea, you know what I mean? I'm sure it could be told in a million different ways. So, but yes, I absolutely agree with you. I think these guys were amazing. They were characters, but they were geniuses. You know, you got the Chip Reese's who stopped on his way to law school and like never really left, and he was amazing. Like, there's just so many stories that I feel like could be told, and with that behind the scenes, and then, you know, just how amazing they really are as people as well. So
sure.
yeah.
I'm curious, as you know, a poker fan and kind of a poker historian. Your dad won a lot of titles throughout his career. You know, we mentioned the 1997 main event championship, for which he won a bracelet. You know, he won back-to-back years in the late 1970s. Where are all those mementos, those trophies, the bracelets? Do you know where they're at?
Honestly, I don't have a lot of things left over from my dad's memorabilia. He went through a really hard time right before he won his third World Series of Poker, and just lost everything, unfortunately. And so when he did, it all just like went wherever it went, you know. And so that is one thing I wish I did have, you know, some of those things, you know, like
Sure.
home movies and certain things like that as well. Like, it just was really kind of sad at the end. So when he won his third World Series of Poker, after all that happened, I just feel like it gave him this confidence and this life back. Like, no, this is really who I am. Like, I'm able to overcome all this that I just went through, and then to come back and win a third time and break this record. But it just so happens, you know, he ended up passing away about a year later of heart failure. So he never really fully got to see what would continue on. But I'm just glad that he got to experience that, at least, you know, right before his passing. So
I know there are a lot of poker fans out there that often wonder, you know, if your dad was still around when the poker boom happened, just what sort of influence he would have on the game then, and you know, his stardom would have skyrocketed even more. You know, he would have been
oh yeah.
certainly one of the superstars of poker in the modern age.
Yeah, I agree. I actually used to be in, like, how everybody is, like, when you're in a restaurant or wherever you're at and you see it up on the screen, the you know, the different tournaments going on. And before, I used to be like, oh, I can't even watch this, because I know my dad was around. He would have been totally all involved in this. So for me as a daughter, it was always like, what could he have, you know, what could he have turned into? So there was a little bit of that, like grieving of like, he would have loved this, you know. So, but now I'm fine. Years later, you know, I've worked through my healing and all that. And yes, I still miss him, but I understand that, you know, it's an amazing game. And I love that it has taken on this whole other world of just becoming so popular. It wasn't before. Actually, my dad's was the first year the 97 World Series was the first year it was ever even televised. So then from there, it like took off into this like boom, which I think is really amazing that there's such an interest.
Right. Well, he certainly looms large in poker hearts and the poker history. I know you're going to be continuing to share stories and answering questions. If poker fans want to follow along or possibly get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that, on what social media and whatnot?
Right now, I've just been communicating with mostly everybody through my Instagram account. I may explore getting, like, you know, other avenues of contact, but that one I actually check every single message myself. So you could reach out to me on Stefanie Ungar on my Instagram page. And I check every single one of the messages. I love responding and talking with fans and engaging. I love the poker community. So it's been really great these last few weeks. So.
Well, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to chat with us at Poker News and sharing stories about your dad. It's been a real treat.
Thank you so much, Chad. I appreciate it.